The beauty of the garden speaks about the skill of its gardener. Nirmala blossoms each day because of its brilliant nurturer. Yes, I invite our Honorable Principal, Dr. K.V. Thomas, to deliver the inaugural address. Sir, please.
A respected resource person, Dr. Nebu Abraham, Brand Manager, Malayala Manorama, Prince Samuel Joseph Sir, the Program Coordinator, Adil G. Augustine, Convener of the Program, faculty members of Communicative English Department, also the Department of English, teachers of Nirmala College, and from various institutions, and dear students. I take this opportunity to congratulate the Department of Communicative English, especially the Program Coordinator, Prince Samuel Joseph Sir, for the conduct of this webinar on media, cacophony, and deficient democracy. Media plays a significant role in delivering the latest news to the public. People view these news in different perspectives. Still, we can see that media is very eager to publicize certain news, and on the other hand, they downplay some purposefully. Also, certain news are manipulated in favor of political preferences. Indian democracy provides sufficient freedom for media, which seems to be misused at times. Therefore, the topic media, cacophony, and efficient democracy is very relevant for discussion. Dr. Nebu John Abraham is the right person as a resource person for this webinar. Thank you, Dr. Nebu, for being with us today, despite of your busy schedule. Let us hear from him. I declare that this webinar is inaugurated. I wish all the success for this program. I conclude by thanking all the participants from all over India. Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So, the most awaited moment has arrived. We have with us Dr. Nebu John Abraham, Branch Manager, Malayala Manorama. Words are not enough to describe his expertise as a brand manager with a demonstrated history of working in the media industry. He has set a benchmark in advertising, event management, market research, and brand management. Moreover, he is also a versatile writer and has got strong passion for media and communication. He pursued his MBA focusing in brand management and market research from SRM University and MPhil from JNV. He has also secured a PhD in economics. Hearty welcome, sir, and we would love to listen to you. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. So, in a few words, can we start? Is it audible to all?
Yes, sir. You can start.
Yes, sir.
It's audible.
In a few words, let me thank Dr. K.V. Thomas, Principal, Nirmala College, T.M. Jacob sir, and student coordinators who have invited me to present this interesting topic. I have immense pleasure in addressing you all on such an important topic which we encounter on our daily life, and yet wondering, hey, what is happening around? Why is it? What is wrong with it? And all. Democracy and media are considered as necessary evils. But the necessary evil does not mean that it has all-pervading authority to bypass questioning. So let us find out an answer to such an important question by the end of this discussion. The organization of this presentation will have 10 slide, will have 10 sections. Please have a look at the sections in the slide for a minute. Okay. Yeah. Can you all see the slides? Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes.
Yeah. So I'm just so these are the sections that I'm going to cover in this particular seminar. Let us begin with the struggle and emergence of liberal media. Perhaps it will be illuminating if I start with a brief introduction on the first newspaper, Bengal Gazette, also known as Calcutta General Advertiser. The newspaper started with the blessings of Augustus Hickey in the year 1780. The stated policy of Hickey's newspaper is still inspiring for our generation. Hickey said that Bengal Gazette is a weekly, political, and commercial newspaper, open to all parties but influenced by none. He added that his newspaper stands for freedom of conscience, freedom of education, freedom of speech. Later, this press was seized by authorities, fearing its high moral standards. Followed by this, the first Indian newspaper met with a premature death. Ever since the emergence of first newspaper, press had difficult times when engaging with the rulers. Is there any evidences for this historical conflicts? Yes, of course. I'll just give some example to understand the gravity of the conflicts. The first one, obviously, is the decision to start an official newspaper by Wellesley. Following by this, there was a regulation imposed by Warren Hastings, is popularly known as Hastings Regulation. Following it, the British Indian government has imposed Gagging Act immediately after Sepoy Mutiny, followed by Vernacular Press Acts, Defense of India Act, Press Regulation Act on 1942. This was imposed just after Quit India movement. And finally, the restrictions on communal reporting. What I have showed you above is the humble beginning of Indian media. The spirit of journalism of those days before 1940s were based on Gandhian spirits. A passion was there for India's freedom. Young India and Navajivan, the two newspapers started by Gandhi, did not accept any advertisements. To summarize, press stood for high standards and independence. It's quite logical for us to think that if our press was so good at a time when we didn't have democracy and own constitution, logically it must do much better under a constitution and democracy. Today, looking back to the glorious beginning, I feel ashamed. Turning to the metamorphosis of media in the post-independence. Now, Indian media faced its gravest threat during emergency in 1975, and that too imposed by a democratic government. On August 2005, Delhi High Court observed that outdated laws with respect to press enacted by British India need an overhauling. In the same year, Press Council of India also came out with some norms for journalistic conduct. The introspection by press was based on the principle of self-regulation, quite consistent and conforming with the so-called liberal democratic country. Unfortunately, by this time, credibility of media plunged to an irreparably lowest level, quite contradictory to our expectations. The depth of its fall can be gauged by unwelcome practices such as negativity, glorification of rich people, carrying celebrity news, celebrity marriages, hiding of news, selective and aggressive tone, undercoverage of rural, poor, and labor issues, the tendency of paid news, in popularly known as page 3, unapologizing stance in the events of errors, intrusion on privacy, scandal news, agenda for repeating news, etc., etc., etc. Now, we have seen the trends of media. Now, the question is, what sort of implication would it have on democracy? Is it a structurally induced evil? Do we have a democracy at all? I will address this issue under this section, Contradictions in Democracy. In India, almost 71 to 80%, 80 crore people have voting rights, and out of this, 68% used their voting rights in the recent elections. In such a democratic country, media is a very crucial and very important. The role of media is fundamentally meant to mitigate the information asymmetries between executive, judiciary, and public. At least in theory, lesser information asymmetries, lesser the evils. Okay, if that is fine, why then it is not performing or functioning well as we expected? It's very curious. The answer lies in the very concept of democracy itself. Now, look at this statement by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In the strict sense of the term, true democracy has never existed and will never exist. Rousseau thought that individuals have unlimited freedom. This also landed him in a trouble. What was the trouble? His conception of direct democracy or pure democracy was different from our representative democracy. Under pure democracy, if each one decide to be their own judge, such a state of nature will be either inoperative or tyrannical. So, having understood this limitation, Rousseau later modified or moderated his stand and thought that social contract implies power to the sovereign government. And this particular government will have a right to punish and force whoever refuses to obey the general will. He termed it as forcing to be free. Thus, the individual will be cancelled out and result in a paradigm of general will that will remain in the common interest of all like a gravitational force. So please understand that democracy itself carries seeds of tyranny. We should not think that democracy do not carry seeds of tyranny. It forces minorities, it forces other marginal sections towards a general will. The real problem lies here. The discord commences when media promotes the desired and necessary individual will and stand for plurality. But at the same time, we should remember that media could even collude with general will and suppress the individual will. Why not? They can do that. This forcing free can be seen in a different dimension as well. Minorities can even force their will to a common people, majority. How can it will happen? We will see it in a later slide. Before this, let me take you to an important golden rule for democracy stated by a famous philosopher Immanuel Kant. He advised or proposed that in ideal democracy, all men should count equally in determining actions by which many are affected. This is a golden rule that is applied universally for all democratic countries. I don't know how many democratic states, countries following this particular maxim. Earlier I stated that minority will can be imposed on majority also. Look at International Monetary Fund, World Bank and World Trade Organization. These organizations represents elite countries and impose their strict laws and directions on third world countries. And this is particularly known as dependency theory promoted by Samir Amin and other intellectuals. The power of independent state is surpassed by laws of technology from Google, Facebook, and Amazon as well. I will cover this aspect in a later stage in this presentation. So please remember that majority will can be applied forced on a minority, and minority will also can be forced on majority in a democratic society. Now, it is very important to see some of the contradictions in democracy before we proceed to discuss another issues. Democracy was never an ideological passion of our modern Indian citizens. They rather prefer nationalism primarily for blind political reason. Intellectuals blame lack of democracy, whereas middle class tend to blame excess democracy for sort of all ills. There is a big moral crisis. Let me explain the moral crisis that we are facing. The impunity of politicians despite corruptions, high-handedness of governments, threat of violence, encroachment of private property of etc. are some of the moral crises that we are facing today. Supreme Court judges are tilting towards majoritarianism, echoing that Hinduism is a majority and general will. This is ignoring the past history of India. Expectation of people from democratic state, there is a big gap in that. The expectation of democratic state and capacity to attend to this well-being is widening. Electoral bonds and crony capitalism has grown as a cordial cooperation with politicians. Lack of elections within the political party and poor performance attendance in parliament is yet another concern. Caste politics and racism, communalism are aimed at dividing people or working class. Absorption of the economy by a small elite implied that democracy and freedom is just a hypocrisy. At this juncture, I draw your attention to three most relevant approaches that I find very interesting with my experience for your knowledge. This will also help to understand the underpinnings of the society, the perspectives of Marx, Schumacher, and Chomsky. Karl Marx thought that contents of newspaper is tilted towards the elite. He thought that it's manufacturers' newspaper, ignoring the proletariat who are majority in the society. What is its implication? Media is never fair to proletariat. It is not liberal and neutral. It is biased, seriously biased. Please reflect on this idea with the current state of affairs. Moving to Schumpeter, he has an opposite, completely different concept about uh, newspapers. In fact, it is unnoticed by many, but I think basically because it is given as a footnote in his main book. He thought that newspaper becomes public. It becomes public in their pursuit for maximum sales, even though there may be some short-term influence of advertisers. Schumpeter believes that capitalism even subsidizes and educates intellectuals. Journalism only belongs to intellectual types. What are the implications of this particular viewpoint? Owner cannot influence contents. Owner seeks only profit. And may I request all this audience to reflect upon this to the current state of affairs. Let me move to Chomsky, an influential thinker of modern world. His model is better known as propaganda model. He thought that there are some factors that influence news. Concentration or monopoly of the newspaper or media, influence of advertisers, sources of news like PTI, Reuters, or some of the news sources are even CAA. Similarly, negative response from the enforcers. Enforcers means UN, World Bank, WTO, and all. And finally, anti-communism. Now, what are the strategies to achieve this propaganda activity? He thought that agenda setting, frame of analysis, tone of analysis, seeking higher ups, and repetitive news are the strategies that are commonly adopted by media world around. I shall elaborate it in case any of you has a doubt in the question answer session. Now it is time for us to see press in detail. I shall take up the monopoly aspect of a newspaper. One or two firms controlling 50% or more share of the market is defined as a situation of monopoly. I will show you some empirical evidences for monopoly in media, print media. Please look at this table. The first table gives the languages, Indian languages. The second column, number of newspapers in each languages. And the third one is readership. This data is taken from Indian Readership Survey, which is an acknowledged, authorized data by all media in India. Assam will have 6 newspapers, Bengali 10, English. In Malayalam, it is 8 newspapers. Around 20 lakh, uh, 2 crore readership. Now look at this small table I have given in the right side. The calculation is the concentration ratio or monopoly, indication of monopoly in India. If you take up the average concentration, a single firm on an average controls 40% of share in India. If you add one more publication in each language, the average concentration ratio in India will be 67%, quite high from the definition of 50% that I have shown you just. Look at this table. This table gives the concentration ratio or percentage with 2 firms in each language. In Punjabi, it goes up to 91% with 2 firms. In Malayalam, when you add up Madhubhumi along with Malayala Manorama, it goes up to 79%. When you add up only one publication in Malayalam, it is just 48%. Adding up Madhubhumi also to this, you will get 79%, which is quite high in any sense. This chart is a very interesting chart. This shows the concentration on the one axis and market size on the other axis. Clearly pictures that there is, smaller markets face substantial threat than the bigger ones. There is no space for a competition in smaller markets. It implies that small dailies will be shutting down soon, and the bigger ones will survive in the future. Again, this table indicates the voter turnouts and concentration in 2 axes. Does this mean that monopoly markets are able to drive their propaganda in a passionate and credible way? Higher concentration, the higher the concentration, higher the voter turnout. It shows the media power. It suits to the propaganda model. People think that there is a correlation between literacy and voter turnouts. But in fact, the correlation is not that strong. Which again implies that media has got a big power in influencing voter turnouts. I'm just stopping this with these slides with respect to the press, and just quickly go through the scenario of television in practice. In distribution networks, multi-satellite organization operators, and then MOSO has 100% share in local cable. Den has 100% share in 19 distribution companies and 50% share in 15 companies. Take the case of Network 18. Network 18 belongs to Reliance, which has invested around 4,000 crores in media. It has investment in distribution networks such as DEN and Amazon. Network 18 also owns channels like CNBC, CNN, Enadu Network, and all. It owns magazines like Overdrive, Forbes, etc. Adding to this, besides this, it also owns online portals like Money Control, Book My Show, and Home Shopping. I'm not just going through the monopoly power of television. I'm just giving an instant and a case of Network 18 to show you the kind of monopolization that we are going to see in future. Let me take you to the digital and social media activism. We all believe that we are living in a democratic, liberal country. To what extent is it correct? The digital environment is revolutionizing everything. It passes through three phases which we are not well aware of. Conditioning, digital media is conditioning our behavior, herding people and tuning them. Conditioning allows certain context and then modifies our behavior, while herding controls the individual's immediate context, and tuning. How much time do we have? I think I'll just quickly cover it as it is very important for all of you, and it covers an important aspect of the whole discussion.
Yes, sir.
So anyway, I will continue. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Now the digital. Sorry to all participants, it got interrupted. So I'm just continuing with the social media part of the discussion. The digital environment and social media is important aspect in media and democracy. It connects between democracy and media together. In fact, it affects both part of this polity. How does it affect? Digital environment, in fact, is conditioning, herding, and tuning people. It is a kind of behavioral modification. People are conditioned to allow to perform something in a certain context and which modifies their behavior. Herding is another method through which the subjects immediate context is controlled and then herd them together. Another aspect of this thing is tuning. the manipulator tries to align people's behavior in a predictable way. Actually, a manipulator can do it in a wonderful manner. It has a lot of influence and effect on the conduct of pure democracy. Now, the social media is promoting a kind of different power. It is known as instrumentarian power. I don't know how many of you have heard about this power. It's quite different from a democratic power. This is an instrumentarian power. Interestingly, it operates through a non-violent behavior modification suitable to elites or a manipulator, clever manipulator. The elections that are manipulated in 2008, Russian influence of election in America, our Modi's election, our PM Modi's election, and then the Kejriwal's election are all typical examples of instrumentarian power. Markets, projects are all dependent on the data. It avoids uncertainty and risk, which is quite important for a liberal democracy. How many of you are not losing your solitude, anonymity, and intimacy? You are absolutely deprived of your individuality. But social media has three elements now. The Google on the top of it declares, and FB on the top of it declares that secret are lies, sharing is caring, privacy is threat. Actually, we are, slowly transforming to an instrumentarian power. We must understand that. The another important problem of social media is disinformation. Disinformation, in fact, kills democracy. The case of Cambridge Analytica and Arogya Setu are all relevant in this context. These are all potential threat to democracy. Now I quickly go through the connection between politics and cross social media. Politics and media is, connected too tightly. Rajya Sabha members are all rich people. They have all connection with business magnates. Asianet News Republic, both are promoted by a Rajya Sabha member. Pawar family owns the famous Sakal in Maharashtra. Biju Patnaik family owns Sambad, a newspaper, famous newspaper in Oriya. The sale of Enadu to Reliance happened due to the clash between Rajasekhar Reddy and Enadu, owner of Enadu, known as Ramoji Rao. Sharda Group, which involved in 20,000 crore scandal, owns 8 local newspapers in 5 languages. They own radio, FM, and employs around 5,500 journalists with them. Look at the scene where we are in and reflect upon on the democracy that we are seeing around us. As time is going on, I quickly go through the cross media ownership. The issue of cross media ownership is very grave. In fact, US bans cross media ownership to promote competition. It bans television, radio, and broadcasting station operating in the same local market. In India, News Network 18, SR Group, Times of India, Sakal, Dainik Bhaskar, and SL Group, Star Group, they all own cross media ownership. See to what extent business groups are controlling the uh, the the entire scene of our democracy and politics. No matter why ethics is very important in a democracy. In media ethics, I go back again to Immanuel Kant for a basic principle. He recommended us to think whether your actions can be applied to you or to all others at all the times, all space, and all categories. If action or decision is universally applicable, then it can be morally justified. This particular uh, rule may be applied to all uh, democratic parties and media. Having said all these things, I just draw your attention to the way forward. What can be done? Is there a way out? Yes, we must think about some way out. The first question that comes to my mind is self-regulation method is sustainable? Now media is, says that they will control themselves. But I think in Britain, British democracy has constituted a commission known as Lebson Commission. It's a judicial public inquiry in ethics related to British press after a phone hacking scandal chaired by Lord Justice Lebson in 2011. The commission submitted a lot of suggestions to the British Parliament to improve the relations between press, police, and politicians. I don't know why judiciary is left out, but still, this is a major trend. That self-regulation method is not sustainable. We can have a commission for a right conduct and cordial relations between the different institutions in the democracy. Also, democracy as an institution needs to transform. It needs to promote egalitarian concepts and grow from utilitarian and other libertarian concepts. Should show responsiveness and responsibility to marginal sections of people. It should transform. Democracy is not a majoritarian principle alone. Its core lies in inclusiveness. This is the way how we have developed the division of our states based on the languages is such an example. Dialogues and inclusiveness is the core of democracy, and majoritarian rule cannot be applied in our country. And many of us think that democracy is safe. Do not believe that democracy will continue, grow, and mature and will be unchallenged in a capitalist system that we are now. Remember a quote from Kenneth Arrow, a Nobel Prize winner in economics. I certainly accepted the general belief that capitalist class will overthrow democracy rather than lose its power, as it had done in Italy, Germany, and then striving to do in Spain. So we should be vigilant. People should be vigilant. Paul Sweezy, another famous economist from Harvard University, has already noted that fascism begins from the crisis of capitalism. So we cannot remain complacent. We should be vigilant to protect if it is to survive. Going back to our constitutional values of socialism. Our society is a socialist democratic society. Socialist, secular, democratic society. This is the only way forward for the current state of affairs. It should turn away from communalism, identity politics, and all. So with this thing, I think I must stop, and I'm certainly glad to attend your questions on this topic, and I shall try to understand. Thank you all, and once again, sorry for the interruption in between. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was a fabulous session, and our participants are so keen for the question answer session. Here we have a couple of questions in the chat box. First one is by Snehalada Pooja Panda. Yeah. She asked, how can we how can we reduce the quantity of paid media? How can we reduce the quantity of paid media?
Very interesting question indeed. Paid news actually have promoted by Times of India. Is it audible?
Yes, sir.
No, is it audible?
Yes, sir. It's audible.
Audible. Okay. So the question is, how can we reduce the quantity of paid news? Very interesting question indeed. This paid news is a bad practice which has started by Times of India around 6-7 years before. Actually, it's a bad practice, but the question is that the owners of different newspaper promotes a kind of profit-seeking culture. If you are trying to look for paid news, then you will have to really compromise with ethics and other moral aspects of our conduct. Therefore, in fact, we need to be very cautious about profit-seeking aspect from the media. I know that many of will be perplexed to think about such kind of affair. It is only possible if the price of newspaper is increased substantially, and it should, it should completely go to a kind of subscription model. But then there is a payoff between there is a trade-off between these kind of activities. If you are slowly going towards a kind of high price subscription model, the circulation will come down. That is one thing. And in this question, in this scenario, practical business people will always look for profit maximization, and this is a big source, big practice that cannot be completely do away with in the current state of affairs. I don't think that this can be ready. But then, media like Malayala Manorama, we strongly believe, our editorial strongly believe that our contents have very strong opinion and credibility. And on credibility, innovation, and competence, we can avoid this kind of paid media model and stick on to the commercial advertising, the general commercial advertising to proceed further. But anyway, it's a crucial question, is a big discussion among media. And I think in future it will evolve to a better practice.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Next, we have a question by Pallavi Bharadwaj. Okay, her question is, are media trials viable solution to justify the truth? Are media trials viable solution to justify the truth?
Yeah. The truth actually has many dimensions in me. So, in fact, there are two sides to this thing. When a newspaper or a media or a television starts reporting it, it is a kind of factual reporting activity. There cannot be any, hiding of truth from the public.
So my question, I want to ask some question.
Just let me complete this question.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah, complete answer. So now, if it is a factual reporting, there can't be any scope for hiding truth from the public. But then, in the newsroom, if it is manipulated with agenda, repetition, analysis, and if it goes through a kind of propaganda model, then definitely truth will be at stake. I think we must avoid the propaganda model and stick on to factual reporting, unbiased reporting for the interest of public. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
I think Mr. K.L. Koyal has some questions. Sir, you may please ask.
Yeah. Please.
Okay. Yeah, you may. I think some technical error has occurred.
Technical problem. Oh, fine.
Anyway, we move on to the next question. It's by Sona S.
Yeah.
Are the news sources we have becoming better or worse? Are the news sources we have becoming better or worse? What about the content of an average newspaper or television channel?
Interesting questions. News, the sources of news are generally becoming cluttered now. And there are two trends. The traditional news sources are obviously, Press Trust of India, United News, and other sources that is available in the public among the for the press. Now there is another trend that is emerging apart from Reuters and other news sources. World Bank, World Trade Organization, UN, and all are influencing, media for giving a particular kind of news contents. Having said all these things, an interesting aspect you must particularly see is the emergence of Google, Facebook, and all. So now individuals are all content creators. Many experts have themselves started writing in social media. Many ministers have started writing in news media. Professionals have started disseminating knowledge. Google is providing valid information on your fingertips. So now there is a big competition happening. There is a big clutter happening in the market. The newspaper and media are no longer the only source of of information providers. Now, in such kind of situation, the public is in a big trouble. In social media, it has to search for a credible people. In Google, it has to search for a credible, source and all. It takes a lot of time, but then if they spend time, they will get credible news. Now the question is, how can the traditional media cope up with this kind of competition? In this kind of competition, a media can survive only if and only if it becomes swift, analytical, investigative, and factual. It should be unbiased and try to improve the credibility and consistency of its brand image. Unless and otherwise, this we cannot really get along with a competition like this. I think I have answered this thing, isn't it?
Okay, sir. Thank
Yeah.
you. We have received the question from Kyle Goyal. He has asked, how can we stop fake and sensational news spreaded by the social media and news channels?
How can?
How can we stop fake and sensational news spreaded by the social media and news channels?
Okay. Now the thing is, in channels, fake news, the controlling of fake news in channels can be easily controlled if you are ready to give a case in your nearest court nearby. There are constitutional provisions to complain against fake news which malign their reputation and all. That is a constitutional method that we can do. Then another thing is you can complain a fake news to the Press Council of India and other similar councils that govern the TV channels. That is the natural method that we must do. And the channels and news media believe that they do not come into a kind of way, or they do not believe in strict laws imposed upon them, and they do not believe controlling news and analysis. Instead of them, they believe in self-regulation. So moral and ethical kind of self-restriction also, self-regulation also should be practiced within the media. In social media, fake news cannot be controlled at all unless and until it becomes so obscene and very criminal kind of activity. You can definitely control complain this thing to the nearest police station, or we can register a cyber crime case against this thing. You can complain and they will search and find out the person, and they will be getting a punishment according to the law. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a question by Rajesh Ahuja. He asked, media houses are now owned and controlled by few industrialists who will put in content true or fabricated to suit political leadership in power to gain their own business interest. What's the way out, sir?
In fact, this is the question that we have addressed in the entire section. Actually, this is a big problem that we are facing now, because as I told in the beginning, during the beginning of Indian media, it was a humble beginning, and we had a spirit and passion for truth, and we stood for freedom of our country. Later, when we got independence and a constitution of our own, we slowly changed towards a kind of liberal democracy. Liberal democracy allows media to function, and it encourages individuals to invest in media. Now, uh, the problem is you cannot come out without, you cannot come out with the business, you cannot come out with it now, because already we are into a kind of a liberal capitalist democracy, and so we are legally bound and constitutionally bound to accept investments in media by big media tycoons, big industrialists. But as I said before, in US there is a law. By law, they have banned cross media ownership by a particular media in a particular locality. It will not allow a TV channel to invest in radio, press, and in other distribution activities in a particular network. So such kind of regulations can be certainly made, but it depends upon the willpower of the democratic government that is in authority. So therefore, like Lebson Commission, I have before concluding, I have mentioned about Lebson Commission. So we can entrust a commission to study this, and we can come out with certain recommendations to limit the investments from private who has conflict of interest. So I think that is the only way out at present in this kind of society. I think we need to understand that how this is the way that the liberal democracy is working, and I think it's a very sad state of thing that that we are going through, and I am apologetically saying that this is a very sad state, but this is the true state of affairs. When the Sarada Chitti Fund is owning and employing around 1,500 journalists, we all know that it's a fake, it's a big fraud company, but still employing around 1,500 employees. So one suggestion that I give perhaps is a people's cooperative to be formed, and people should invest in, and a cooperative media from people's side should start a people's democracy, people's media to promote the larger interest of people in a particular country or a state or a locality, to promote unbiased news which is unhindered, uninterrupted by industrial tycoons.
Okay,
Yeah.
sir. Thank you. We have a question from Jwala Teresa Jason. She is a student of Communicative English.
Yeah.
She asked, Sir, is independent media a non-profit media? Can a media exist so? Is independent media a
Yeah.
non-profit?
Good question. Is actually newspaper economics is quite different from other products. And I have had occasions in several meetings on the discussion about the pricing of newspaper. There are different methods that is done now. The common method is the press council will meet, and the different media owners will come together and decide how much we can increase, and people will decide on they will decide on the price increase, and it's commonly agreed. In many places the price of newspaper is somewhat similar, except Times of India, when they have decided to go it alone with their own pricing, with their own low pricing. And it is possible, but the Times of India can do it only because of the fact that it garners a lot of advertising revenue. So now the newspaper economics is very interesting. That it is subsidized by advertising revenue. Without advertising, it cannot cover the costs that is spent on producing. Therefore, without the ratio between advertising revenue and circulation revenue is keep on rising. Advertising revenue will be around 80%, and circulation revenue will be around 20%. So 80-20 principle is applicable to a newspaper also, that it is expecting revenue from advertising to survive. And this is why they are subscribing to IRS, television audience measurement, TAM data, and all to understand how much reach and audience they have in order to bargain with advertisers. Advertisers are really are very influential in hiding some of the news and tuning the press to make some contents in favorability to their political or business positions. Therefore, I think so long as the private investment is allowed, constitutionally allowed in a country, we cannot come out with that. The only way out of this thing is a subsidizing by government. And the question is, this is very difficult for a government. It is very difficult for a government to subsidize newspapers, because if it tries to subsidize newspapers, many will come to such kind of business, and everyone will look for the subsidized amount and give very poor results. So actually, what we can probably do is a subscription model with high price, but then uh, it is also out of question now because with cheaper amounts you will get a good internet connection, and at the fingertips you will get all sort of information from internet. So I think without advertisement, no newspaper cannot survive. And only thing that we need to do is to decide an ethical principle and stand to promote unbiased, contents, unbiased contents, and we need to promote a kind of vision and passion and spirit to take democracy to a next level, rather than um, you know succumbing to uh, you know to the onslaught of business interests. I think this is the only thing that we can right now do, that within the media, the editorial team and management team can come together and put some ethical and moral standards before them, and strictly conforming to it, for the better future of our country. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
So we have one more question by Anna Maria Magine. She is also a student of Communicative English. Her question is, Sir, you talked about digital environment and how it largely uses behavioral modification and manipulation. We cannot obviously overlook its negatives. The question is, how do we as the public develop a sensor so that we do not fall prey to false news?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Thanks for asking this thing. It is very interesting to say that the environment is completely changing to instrumentarian power. Google, Facebook, and all believes that all secrets are lies. I should call it as a surveillance capitalism. I think Subov has written an interesting book on this, and all of you can purchase this book and read it. It's a very interesting book, Surveillance Capitalism. What does it mean? The entire system is slowly going towards a surveillance kind of mode. You are being watched. And yet, we believe that it is a liberal democratic country. People complain that surveillance is mostly practiced in authoritarian, tyrannical, autocratical countries, and countries. But then it is also applicable to capitalism now. If you are looking, if you are purchasing an Alexa is slowly taking up all the data that is related to an individual. It takes out data from your bedroom. It takes out data from your car. It takes out data from your social media interactions, touch points. It takes out data from your dinner. It takes out data from your restaurant. It takes out data from your voting behavior. It takes out, culls out data from your social media posts, interactions. In fact, you are being watched. And all this data is pulled together without your permission. And with your efforts, you are promoting so much of wealth to the digital media companies. You are not aware of that. You are being robbed. Your data is being robbed. Your labor. How many hours are you working in a social media? How many hours are you spending for in your house? How many hours are you working? Are you watching or searching in Google? All these efforts are being pulled out without your permission by Google, FB, and Amazon. They are using this data for data analysis, and later this brings a lot of money for them. You are not being provided anything. As I pointed out in my slides, you are being conditioning to do something. I presume you understand what conditioning means. You are herding out, you crowded out. You're being crowded out, crowded in, and crowded out by a clever manipulator for something. You are being tuned for the purpose of something. So a clever manipulator can really achieve any kind of objectives that they desire at the end of the day. So now, there is a very interesting novel for all of you to read. The name of the novel is Circle. Circle is actually a story, somewhat a science fiction, somewhat similar to the story of Google. It delineates all sort of questions that may arise in future. Well, I must recommend. I recommend to read Subov's Surveillance Capitalism and Circle, the novel Circle, for to understand some of the intricacies of the social media in a democratic country. Actually, we are depriving of our individuality and rights. We are becoming an open source for everybody, and we are being watched through a lens by remote tech companies. I think this is clear, isn't it?
Okay. Thank you, sir. It looks like we have a few more questions, but as we are running out of time and some of them are repetitive in nature, we are going to conclude the session. Actually, thank you, participants, too. Hope you have all filled the feedback link so that you may get your e-certificates as much as earlier. Sir, it was a fabulous session and it was an enlightening one, too. From Bengal Gazette to digital environment, we had a journey and we actually got much idea about how media got manipulated and how it creates monopoly, how biased news and how even politics influence media. Okay, thank you so much, sir. And it was a very fabulous event. Now I invite Ms. Iron Ajay, the student representative, to deliver the vote of thanks. Iron, please.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, one and all. The best and beautiful things in life cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt by heart. Gratitude is one such prayer, and it is a sign of noble souls. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. I begin with the greatest gratitude to our resource person, Dr. Nebu Abraham, brand manager Malayala Manorama, who enlightened our thoughts on media cacophony and deficient democracy. He reminded with the beginning of the Indian media and mentioned the biased news reports in favor of influential people. He also detailed the ways in which democracy of our country is questioned. He drew our attention to his personal thoughts on the biased manner of media with the current state of affairs. He warned us on the monopolization in the future of media too. Sir, even after the technical issues, you took your time and talked on the topic and patiently answered the questions raised by our participants. Thank you, sir. We all are greatly indebted to our beloved principal, Dr. K.V. Thomas. Thank you, sir, for your presence.
Thank you.
I extend regards to our beloved Bursar, Father Francis Canardin, and our Vice Principal, Professor Saji Joseph, for supporting us through all the ventures, even in their absence. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Father. I express our special thanks to Professor Lena Matthews, HOD of English Department. Thank you, ma'am. And our course coordinator, Mr. Prince Samuel Joseph. Thank you, sir. I extend my gratitude to the convener of this program, Mr. Arun Gio Agustin. Thank you, sir. My expression of gratitude never ends here. We are greatly thankful to Dr. T.M. Jacob, Department of Statistics, and Dr. Nebu Thompson, Department of English, and all other HODs of Nirmala College, Muvattupuzha. We all are sincerely indebted to the immense response and active participations of all the faculty, students, research scholars, and other teachers. Always the last to thank, but first in mind, are the teachers and students of Department of Communicative English, Nirmala College, Muvattupuzha. And thank you all for making this virtual meeting a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank you.
Once more, thank you, sir. Though we had some kind of difficulties in between, you came back and you resumed the session in a very nice manner. And thank you once again on behalf of Department of Communicative.
Thank you for your patient listens to all participants. I extend my thank to all participants for their patient listening to the session.
Thank you, sir. And once more, thank you, participants. Once more, you actually actively participated in the interactive session, and even you had a discussion in the chat box by the time. Okay, thank you so much. We had a great number of registration across India, even from North Indian states, and we are so glad that you received our small venture in a great manner. Thank you all. And it actually shows your curiosity to learn in this pandemic era. So once again, thank you. I hope all of you have filled the feedback form. Yes, thank you. So stay safe and stay healthy. It's me, Purna, signing off. Thank you.